On to part 3. So if you consult your original schedule, we had planned an entire session devoted to the Nubia galleries because we're now compressing our presentations into 3. Nubia is being added to the palace. So it's a little bit of a shortened version, but we did want to kind of present the important component that we've long intended to be part of the renovation of the Cox Wing, which is doing justice to the really significant collection of Nubian archaeological material in the Penn Museum. So out of the collection of somewhat more than 50,000 objects, we have 8,000 objects that come from Nubia. This is a collection that spans work from the early salvage work that began with the low dam at Aswan, 1906, 1907, through the 1960s salvage work connected with the high dam. We have about 24 different sites that are represented, but about 15 kind of really major sites, I guess, in terms of the volume and significance of the material. So from the early Cox excavations that were done 1907 to 1912. Some of the important Middle Kingdom and New Kingdom sites in Lower Nubia, in particular Buhen Fortress and Aniba, ancient Miam, which was the capital of Wawat, of course, in the New Kingdom. Some major Meroitic sites, Karanog and Shablul in particular, other sort of more minor sites, but also representing significant archaeological collections. Araika, which was a C group settlement, sites like Faras and Kasr Ibrim. Other sites excavated in the 1960s, Toshkan, Armina, pretty significant material from there as well. And also augmenting our Nubian collection. In the 1990s, the museum did a traveling exhibition on Nubia, during which we had an exchange with the Boston Museum of Fine Arts, since we have a quite magnificent Meroitic collection, and they had a quite extensive collection from George Reisner's work in Sudan. We had a mutual exchange of objects that would benefit both collections. So we primarily gave them some of our Meroitic material in exchange for material from Kerma, Napatel, Kuru, Nuri, and Meroe. All of this composes a really significant collection, 8,000 objects from Nubia that actually has never had a permanent home in the museum. This is very unfortunate. Despite the potentials of the Cox Wing, not a single smidgen of space has ever been devoted to Nubia. The story of Nubia, apart from the special exhibit in the 1990s, has never been presented in permanent displays in the museum. So a major goal has been to really bring that into the context of our permanent galleries. Just a kind of a hodgepodge, a grab bag, I guess, of material from the Bronze Age, just some examples of material from the cultures of Nubia, A group, C group, Kerma, Pangrave, for instance, material from the Middle Kingdom and New Kingdom, phases of control of Nubia, so statuary from the Middle Kingdom on the left-hand side, our beautiful seated figure of the scribe Amenemhat from Buhen, and various other objects compose the Bronze Age kind of stage of the collection. And then the very sort of magnificent set of material from especially the Meroitic period. So just some examples of the beautiful Meroitic painted wares, a lot of trade goods, personal objects, woodwork, ivory, jewelry, glasswares, metalwork, etc. Especially well represented from the cemeteries of Karanog. So, where to display this? We envisioned, I'd often hoped that we could just build a whole new wing for the Nubia collection. That fell on deaf ears, unfortunately. We didn't have the potential to do that. But off of the south side, adjacent to the upper Egyptian hall that will house the palace, there are these 2 spaces, which you see there in the foreground. They are beautiful small galleries that have been basically unused for the better part of the history of the Cox Wing. Actually, they were initially used as public spaces, but then repurposed for other functions. And so these are the 2 spaces that will house the Nubia collection. There's a staircase that intervenes between the 2 of them, which originally we floated the idea of removing the staircase and just combining them into one single long side gallery. This proved impossible and cost prohibitive, and also the stairway was a means of egress, I think, that had to remain in place. Despite that, we did acquire these two spaces for the Nubia collection, and it works out quite well. The one on the right there is going to house primarily the Bronze Age material, so telling the story of Nubia from prehistory through the New Kingdom. And then on the opposite, the left-hand side there, basically the sort of the golden age of Kush, the story of the Napatan and Meroitic phases of Nubia, but also continuing into the post-Meroitic and early Christian periods. So those are the two spaces that will be dedicated to the Nubia galleries. We were very much pleased to acquire these, actually, even though they were property of the Coxswain for many, many decades. They've been taken over by the catering company. This particular space you see here, which is the Bronze Age, or what we often call Nubia 1, has been used as a kitchen for events, gallery events. So we've reclaimed these public spaces, so we were very pleased to have that. You see some of the work refurbishing the architecture of these spaces. They had beautiful skylights, which we're not going to open up because there's quite a few organic and wood and other UV-sensitive objects in these spaces, but we're going to bring these back to kind of the original kind of beautiful architecture originally designed in the 1920s. This is the second Nubia space. It's not a huge space, but again, it's a beautiful vaulted, again, the Guastavino vaults, a nice space to house the second Nubia gallery. So these are both being refurbished as we speak. The entrances into them, they're going to link with the Upper Egyptian Hall, where of course we have the Palace of Merintah. The connection with the Bronze Age Nubia display is that very, very large door in the center. So even though it is a side gallery, it's going to sort of flow in directly from the palace display of Merintah, and we have thematic links that tie in, especially the story of the New Kingdom, which is a big component of that particular gallery. The smaller door on the right, leading into the Golden Age of Kush, Napata, Meroe, etc. Also has a tie-in to the chronological sequence of the kingship display. And so I really don't have time to go through all of it, but just to kind of highlight some of the different aspects. We have a series of focal components. There's no huge architecture in these galleries, but we do have some significant scaled material, like, for example, that doorway there on the left-hand side, which is the doorway of Ahmoza and Ahmoza Nefertari, dedicated by Churi, the first viceroy of Kush at Buhen. That's kind of a focal element. In front of that will be, which you see there, just go back, that beautiful seated figure of Amenemhat. He was a scribe at Buhen, but also a official who came from a local Nubian family in the vicinity of Buhen, just to the north of the Second Cataract. And they're just the kind of the arc of displays, taking you, starting with prehistory and the Neolithic, the A group display, working your way through the development of the different cultures of Nubia, interaction with Egypt, the phases of Egyptian control, kind of explaining that whole story. Culminating on the right with the New Kingdom Empire and some of the focal pieces. There again, you see the Ahmoza doorway from Buhen, but further to the right, displays highlighting especially the site of Aniba. We have some wonderful material from Aniba. A focal piece there will be the beautiful painted stela of Mary, who was the treasurer, the royal treasurer of Miam in the reign of around about Ramses III. In the 20th dynasty, and we have a lot of the components of the Pyramid Chapel of Mary that will be the focal part of that particular display. And just moving quickly to the second gallery. So here, despite a little bit of a break, of course, as you move to the other gallery, it will pick up the story with the rise of the Napatan kingdom. So some of the material that came through the division with the Boston Museum of Fine Arts from Reisner's excavations at El Kuru and Nuri, royal tombs at Nuri, working our way through into the Meroitic Kingdom, and some rich displays, especially documenting the site of Karanog, ancient Nalut, which was the regional capital of the province of Aachen in the Meroitic period. And in this end of the gallery, we're going to have two of the highlight components. On the far end of it will be a sort of a pyramid case with the magnificent Ba figures, Meroitic Ba figures. Most of those are from Karanog. And then a little bit of kind of a nod to the kind of the open display concept. There'll be a display central case with a very large selection of Meroitic painted wares, cups and jars, which we heard earlier, along with a variety of the personal objects and funerary materials from the Karanog tombs. But anyway, the highlight really of that, the inner end of that will be the Ba figures, of which we have a very nice collection. So that's just a quick look at the Nubia galleries. The goal of this, of course, is to really explore the interwoven history of Egypt and Nubia in these kind of two major separated phases. Okay, so we'll turn it back to Jennifer now. Oh, unless there's questions, sorry. Any questions?
Yeah, any questions on that combined presentation? Yeah, Diane? Diane?
We can hear you up here.
I mean, we can hear you, but it's not on.
Okay. When you're talking about all the new engineering side of getting the galleries reinstalled, and you've got the displays where you're going to talk about the various finds, montage, all that, are you going to have an element on those screens to talk about the redisplay that you're doing at the engineering side of it? Because that a lot of people to know what's gone on to getting those columns back up onto that top level and that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's a great question. We do not currently have that designed in our gallery. As far as the... Go ahead. You.
I was going to say, at the moment, our the digital kiosks have been, we're in sort of the storyboarding phases of that. And so it is possible that that could be a, choose your own adventure, that could be a option 3 on something that someone could choose that story. So I don't think it's something that's been ruled out. And I agree, particularly with the palace and with the columns and the gateway jams, that visitors would be curious.
Those rooms in the dismantled state that you've got them now, to what they're going to become. I think a lot of people will find that very interesting.
Yeah, I think there is, and we'll talk very briefly about it in the lower gallery. There is an intro sort of map and a discussion of sort of the history of the collection, the history of excavations that the Penn Museum has done. And so it may also be that might slot in well there to talk about sort of the history of the Egyptian collection. So you might have images in that digital display as well.
Hello? Yeah. Well, my question is also related to what she said, because, well, I'm an engineer, and for me it would be very interesting to know details about the engineering project the technical side, how it's been done, because actually I'm interested in finding out how engineering working methods can be applied to archaeological research, to archaeological sites, but also to museums as well. So, for example, for me, it's been kind of hard to find publications. There are articles. I'm starting, well, I already started a few years ago, but I'm getting deeper into the topic. But it's pretty hard for me to find information because I'm not going to invent anything new. I mean, a lot of architectural companies, engineering companies have been involved in different kind of projects. So I want to do research, see what has been done, see how things are working, because a lot of progress have been already been made. So it would be very interesting in a project of these characteristics to have publications from the engineering or the technical side, that they put together all the information, the workflow, the process that they've been followed. Also in engineering companies, I work as an engineer. So we have lessons learned after a project has been carried out. And we put together the good things, the bad things that have been happening. And that's how we progress. And how the know-how is shared also within the staff of a company and also with other companies. So it would be very interesting. I don't know if it's an idea. I don't know if they're interested on doing that. But for me, it would be amazing.
No, that's a great point. And I think, this project has, there have been so many different components and so many groups at the museum and external groups that have worked on it. And we as curators were one small part. At the museum, our conservation staff has done a huge amount of work. And they are the ones, I think, who have worked more closely with the structural engineers on a lot of the things that have been done as far as the palace structures and things. Or our project manager, who has worked a lot with the building engineers and things. So it's the kind of thing that I guess all of us coming together to put all of that into a document is something that probably could and should be done. I feel like Egyptologists or the curators, we present at conferences. The conservators, they present their work at conferences. Maybe engineers involved in this project will present at conferences, but maybe we all need to come together and talk about it.
Yeah, it's very nice to hear. Yeah, I mean, we sort of the collective knowledge that we have one large kind of box folder divided into, the engineering component, conservation, curatorial design, et cetera. It exists in these disparate documents and files. I think we definitely should discuss kind of coordinating and putting out something that kind of merges what we've experienced.
I can help.
Once it's taken
I offer
place,
my help.
perhaps, 2 or 3 years from now, I think people might be quite interested in
Yeah, and I think
doing that.
When this project began, and our conservators and other people at the museum sort of reached out to try and find other places that have done projects similar to this. There aren't many places that have rebuilt an ancient Egyptian palace, or so something like having an engineer who would know how some of this could be done would be great. And I think they had trouble finding people who could do that kind of thing. So
Thank you very much.
yes.
Is it appropriate to ask ballpark budget for this project and the funding?
I think it goes up every day.
65 million, I think, is the current figure. It may come in more.
And funded by
Yeah, it's various
variety of sources.
variety of sources, of course. Yes, and
Wow.
they're still fundraising. So as I mentioned, the lower halls are completely funded. Those will open in 2026. We're still fundraising for the Maranatha Palace, and I think we're still a number of millions away from full funding of that.
And then
2028 will be
it's
the
also
goal.
the storage level as well. So it's a complete storage renovation as well. I mean, taken down to gravel floor at the moment. So
Amazing. There are some more questions in the back. Yeah, Tom?
Great space, great objects. Be looking forward to seeing it. Who does the buck stop with as far as interpretation and labeling are concerned? I mean, I guess you're yet to write many of them, but is this something you've worked out yourselves, or is there a giant supra museum target audience and all of that?
We are the source of all of the written material. However, it is digested and restructured to some extent, I think, by the exhibits and education departments. We do have word limits, which are, of course, lower in total number than we would like. So we do have to write to that kind of limited number of words for labels and text panels, et cetera. A lot of the interactives give us more potential, of course, for including a lot of detail that might not make it into the the tombstone labels and text panels. But yeah, it's a group effort. Essentially, the entire text for these galleries is completed at this point, with sort of potential for minor changes, but it is fully designed and fully written.
If there are no other questions, should we? Oh, I'm sorry.
First of all, I would like to thank you. Reconstruction of temples. I think that you turn back the temple from the same place to the life in museum. Construction needs more time, need more funds, but I would like to ask about when you placed or put the statue of the king and the column, have you follow the same dimension and the measurements in the same situ in the temple, in archaeological site or not?
Are you referring to the Heracleopolis column? Is that what you're thinking of in the temple display at the back?
Yeah.
So, I mean, the amount of floor space we have in the rear section behind the Marantaw Palace is limited. What we have done there is display a sort of a highlight collection of architectural pieces, relief fragments, some statuary, the column from the Herishef Temple, placed kind of individually, but telling a story of the Egyptian temple. There's a model of a sort of idealized temple, which I think is actually it's the model of the Herishef Temple that will coordinate with the column. There's displays of foundation deposits also back there. So yeah, I mean, the individual pieces we don't have the room to kind of reconstruct in the same way that we're doing with the Palace of Marantaw, kind of the architectural program of a palace. But we're telling the story of temples and illustrating it with these different components as much as possible in that more limited space.
Yeah.
If that answers your question.
Anyway, it's a great work. And I see that rotunda and notodium is the Roman style, and this inside the museum. So you made museum as a lifestyle in ancient Egyptian. Thank you.
So
expanding on Tom's, did you have to go beyond the museum staff and consult with various communities, like Americans, etc.? Especially, with regards to text, but also display.
Yeah, we've through the process, we've had various consultative groups. So we worked with our education department, the public outreach department. So we've had input, outside input, both from visitors as well as, broadly speaking, community members, the public that attends the museum. So that was done in several different ways, as well as kind of scholarly kind of specialist input and commentary. So yeah, there've been several forms of that have occurred, which gave us some valuable input. Do you want to add?